Hi, I'm Ann Batchelder, and I'm the only mother who used a Greek myth to heal my relationship with my daughter.
Hi, my name is Laura Cathcart Robbins, and this is the only one in the room, but I'm never the only one in this room because, as usual, my boyfriend, producer, and co host, Scott Slaughter, who I call Hun, is here as well.
Hi, honey.
Hey, honey. How are you, Hun?
I'm good. It's really wet.
It's very wet here in Los Angeles. We're in
It
our
is.
El Nino year.
Yeah, I mean our house just outside the door sounds like a waterfall in the
Yeah.
jungle.
And I
So,
found a worm in my office this morning.
oh my God, you went crazy. And how do you
It
feel
was
about worms?
terrible.
Not so good.
Oh,
Laura picked it up and threw it in the trash can, and then came upstairs and goes, "I
I
think I
didn't know
found
what
a
it
worm."
was.
Uh huh.
I thought it was just a piece of trash. I didn't have my reading contact in, so I couldn't distinguish it. And then I came rushing upstairs going, I think I touched a worm.
So the funny thing is, she was okay until I told her it was a worm, and then she just lost it.
Yes, I did.
Uh huh.
But you saved me, hun.
Yes, that's my job.
You got rid of it humanely.
Uh huh.
So we have this really cool guest today, hun. Do you know much about Anne Batchelder?
I only know where she lives and a little bit about her book.
This is her book,
Yes.
Craving Spring.
Hmm.
It's called Craving Spring, A Mother's Quest, A Daughter's Depression, and the Greek Myth That Brought Them Together.
Hmm.
And it came out in October of last year, so just really recently. But what I have, this one that I'm showing you for anyone that's watching our YouTube, is a galley. This is not the actual book that came out in October.
Ooh, you got a special galley.
I got a special galley. And
Yeah.
do you know how I got it?
I heard a story, but I'll let you tell it because you're a better storyteller than I am.
Well, you know what, Anne? First of all, Anne, welcome to the show.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you for
Thank you.
coming on. And I'm going to tell the second half of the story of how I got this book. Why don't you tell the first half of it?
How you got the book?
Yeah.
Um, I was in Asheville and
Where you live, right?
where I live in
Yes.
North Carolina, and I was interviewing another author,
Another
and
Laura.
right, and she mentioned that she was at some point she mentioned she was coming to see you. And I said, "Oh my gosh, I just read this book called Stash that I think is
Mm.
fabulous, and I would love for you to give her a copy of my book." And she said, "Okay, I'll think about it. I'll try to do it. If I remember." And lo and behold, she did, which was wonderful.
Which was amazing. I mean, Laura Carney is who we're talking about. And and she has, is it called My Father's List? Yeah. My
Right.
Father's List is her memoir. We've interviewed Laura here on the show. And she has an incredible story, but she had the longest, most packed book tour of any author I've ever met. I
I
mean, she
know.
went to so many cities and she just kept going and going and going and going. So to even remember to take one thing with
Right.
her, right? And to bring it to California where she was to see me, I thought was really remarkable.
She's a very thoughtful person.
She
She's
is.
great.
Yeah,
Yeah.
she is. And we got to meet her and her husband in person and had a really nice event. They're both plant-based eaters like we are. We didn't get to go to dinner with them, but we had the shared Laura and the shared veganism between the two of us. And we're both authors, memoir authors, which is a really special brand of author, I think. Have you thought about ever writing anything else, Anne, besides memoir, or do you only write memoir?
I haven't at this point. It's just a lot. I mean, I wrote off and on while I was going through this process with my daughter
Yeah.
for about 10 years and journaled and took classes and everything else. So it took me a really long time to write this book and to
Hmm.
get the perspective. And once my journaling started becoming more creative, it was around the pandemic that I decided to shape it into a book. And I didn't really anticipate publishing at that point. I just wanted to understand what the heck happened in our family and our lives, what was going on. And uh, I was really doing it for myself first. And then
Yeah.
I decided to publish it after that. So I'm I haven't really gotten much beyond that at this point.
Yeah. Well, I won't speak for all memoirists, obviously. Wait, I'm sorry. I'm going to clear my throat really quick. I think that most memoirists, I wouldn't say most. I think I've met quite a few memoirists who have started writing just for the catharsis of it, just to
Hmm.
write and get something out, or like me, who are journalers, and journaling is the way that I get things out. But then, oh, this looks like a chapter of a book, or like this
Hmm.
part could be something. And then the idea that my experience could help somebody, which is really evident in your book. So I don't want to get to that part yet. But it seems to be a big driver for memoirists. And so I'm not surprised at all to hear that you were writing it for yourself and then saw that emerging into a book.
Right.
Yeah.
It was really initially I was trying to figure out what had happened with my daughter,
Yeah.
who had was suffering from depression, and then I realized about halfway through putting the book together that it was really about me and my journey, and not about her so much.
Right.
And that's when all of a sudden, when everything started clicking, started changing, and started thinking about actually creating a book.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about your book. You said you were blindsided when your daughter came home saying that she wanted to drive her car into a tree at age
Hmm.
16. Um,
Yeah.
and and then so during that conversation, which I also thought was remarkable, that she came home and opened up to you that way.
Hmm.
Uh, Tell me a little bit about that day and what that was like for you.
It was a normal. It was in the summertime. I was making a family dinner, and I thought everything was fine in our family. Everything was great. My husband and I were happy with our jobs, and kids were doing fine at school. I have a son also who's a little bit older than my daughter, and she had gone off on um, a summer internship job and had come home, and she came in the door, and I thought, well, where is she? What happened? She didn't walk through into the kitchen. And I came around the corner, and there she had sunk down onto the floor and was just a crumpled mess
Mm.
of tears. And I had no idea what was wrong. And I finally just sat down with her and I said, "Tell me what is going on." And she said, "I was so scared. I thought I was going to run my car into a tree. And I came home as fast as I could." And that was just, I just felt my heart just pounding, and I couldn't. And then she said, "And then I have to tell you something else." And I said, "What?" She said, "I'm also have an eating disorder. I can't stop, you know, this problem I have with eating." And I had no idea. I thought she might have been going through some normal teenage adjustment to high school, that kind of thing, but I had no idea that her depression was as deep as it was. And that was the beginning of the end for me of thinking that I knew what I was doing. I just sort of had to start all over and unravel what in the world is going on here.
Yeah, I would imagine that like two really profound things happen at that moment. Your desire to help your daughter,
Hmm.
right? Oh, my daughter's in trouble. She's come to me with this as her mom. It's my
Right.
sworn duty and, her birthright to have me help her with this because I'm the person
Hmm.
who does that. And then the other profound thing must have been, how did I miss this? What does this mean? Right?
Yeah,
What
absolutely.
yeah, like how do I make these two things make sense? And so tell me about the how did I miss this part? Like what was that like for you?
I think any mother who goes through that kind of experience is going to feel some level of guilt and confusion and terror and um, just blame. It's not, it was just like when you have a baby, you're supposed to take care of it, nurture it, make sure it's protected. And, when your child gets older, if something happens, of course, you're going to feel responsible. But I think for me, I felt so overwhelmed with guilt and confusion and how did this happen and what was going on and why did this happen, that I kind of was torturing myself with this. And I think it got in the way of actually helping her.
Right. Is there anything in hindsight that you know that you missed or anything you would have done differently?
I knew she was having some troubles with adjustment, and perhaps I could have um, intervened. I don't know. This is really hard to
Yeah.
talk about because it's so long ago and it was 2020 hindsight. But I think that what I did learn in the whole process of this is the importance of keeping the lines of communication open, making sure that you're being honest with yourself, as well as allowing your kid to be who they are and not. I think the problem was that our our daughter and son were very, very different people, and I think we didn't understand that maybe she had really different needs than the first child, and we just sort of, oh, it's wash and repeat. We'll just do this again. Here's number two.
Right.
And I didn't really understand, I think, how different she was than he was, and how her needs were not fitting into our type A family of
Right.
achievers. And she was a different kid,
Yeah.
and I didn't understand that part of it. But also, I think that it's really important to. I mean, we were close and we were able to communicate, but I think it was my missing how deeply she was hurting, and she was hiding a lot of it too,
Yeah.
because that's what people do when they're thinking something's wrong with them. They hide,
Mm-hmm.
as you know. You've got,
Yeah, I do.
yeah,
It's the
right,
title of my book.
right, exactly,
um,
exactly.
but it seems to me like the lines of communication were open because she
They
came
were.
and spoke to you about this. It's hard
I
to get things out of teenagers,
Well,
especially,
and I
yeah,
also think she was. I also think she was terrified, and she there. This was back in 2010. There wasn't a lot of open discussion about mental health. There wasn't a lot of open discussion about, um, there's a lot of shame and blame going on all the way around. So I think it's a little different now than it was then.
yeah. I mean, for sure, there's different language. Scott and I have our kids range from 26 to 19. And mental health is a discussion that they have really openly. It's not
Right.
something that I discussed when
Hmm.
I was their age.
Right.
I don't think anybody was talking about mental health
Mm-mm.
then. And I feel like Gen Z and millennials to some extent really stand up for their mental health now. But you're right.
Right.
When I got sober in 2008, a lot of this language was absent from the culture, and in 2010, I would imagine the same thing. So, what happens next? She comes to you
Well,
with
I
this,
mean,
yeah,
one thing I did want to say was the other thing that was missing in the culture at that time was that mothers were often blamed for whatever was wrong with their kids.
yeah,
And so there was a lot of shame on my part and a lot of isolation and a lot of fear of how I was going to be judged. How could I let this happen? That type of thing. And it's one of the reasons I wrote the book, was to make sure that people understood that that's not really what's going on.
yeah. Well, and probably my favorite part of your story is the part that we're going to get to a little bit later, which is you on that road of self-discovery of
Hmm.
how to navigate this for yourself, which in turn is the best way to navigate it for your daughter, who happened to be on the receiving end.
Right.
But prior to that, it seems to me in learning about your story that you did what anybody I know would have done, which was to hope she'd get better and then do what you could to get her the help she needed. But there was also like,
Right.
and maybe this will work, and then we won't have to worry about it anymore. Like maybe this
Right. I
worked.
wanted to fix it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So tell me about that part.
Well, I had, first of all, back then, there was kind of a disconnect about understanding eating disorder and depression and addiction. It was all separate somehow. There wasn't an understanding about that. So I found a therapist who understood eating disorder, and we worked very clearly on how to get her back on track with that. And once I felt like she was back on track, I thought, oh, good, problem solved. I didn't have any idea what was really necessary to recover.
Right.
And I wasn't, I don't think it was really understood as well back then either. So she got better and got more in charge of her life and went to college, and then started having social anxiety and wanting to fit in and everything else, and exchanged eating disorder for a drug addiction.
Mm.
And then all of a sudden that became a problem. So yeah, it was confusing for me as a mother, because I wanted it to be all done.
Yeah.
I wanted it to be fixed and over with, and let's get back to normal. And okay, that was a blip. Let's continue. And I really didn't understand that it's a lifelong recovery.
Yeah. You don't have addiction in your family?
I don't personally have, I mean, I think my father might have been a what they call the businessman's alcoholic.
Mm.
I mean, he was completely in charge, but managed to make sure he had a double martini all the time,
Mm.
and that kind of sort of Mad Men type of guy.
Sure.
But no, for me and my personal family, that was not
So this was looking
an
out
issue.
for the symptoms of an addiction wouldn't have been something you would have done naturally. Yeah.
Or depression
Or
or any of
depression.
that. My husband's family did, but my family didn't. So I was pretty clueless about those kind of symptoms.
Yeah, and when you say that she got better when she was still in high school, like she joined a sports team, right? And
Hmm.
she really looked like maybe she had licked this. Like
Yeah.
this was what she needed. She needed these therapeutic sessions so that she could get over the eating disorder, and then that you didn't see them as separate things. I guess the depression and the eating disorder, they felt like maybe the depression fueled the eating disorder, and if you cured one, then you cured both, right?
Well, I mean, it was, I think also at the time when all this was coming up and I realized she was depressed, she also went to see a psychiatrist and got on medication. And so all of a sudden
Mm,
that started getting better also.
right,
And
right.
so it's like, oh, okay, we're good.
Yeah, I mean it feels like it. So when she called from college and said that she needed to come home, you didn't know why, right?
I just thought maybe she didn't like school. She was socially sort of unhappy there. I didn't understand. I had no idea. I had no idea why she was coming home, but we were supportive. And yeah, if you're not happy there, you need to come home. We'll support that. You can go to college at home and all
Mm-hmm.
that. So
Yeah,
yeah.
which feels very um average, right? Like
Hmm.
typical. I don't want to say normal. I'm avoiding that word, but it feels
Right,
like
right.
something that might typically happen to somebody who's off to college on their own for the first time and is having experiences that might be overwhelming. So yeah,
Hmm.
come home, go to school locally, right? And
Figure it
then
out.
kind of
Yeah.
recalibrate and see what you want to do.
Hmm. Hmm.
And then she invited you to therapy. Is that correct?
Right.
Yeah. So tell
Hmm.
me about that.
Well, um, I was, she was acting a little strange. I mean, a lot strange. I mean, she was, personality wise, she was not the person that I knew. I didn't know she was uh, what she was going through. So when she went to therapy, she invited me to come with her. And I thought, oh, great, we're finally going to have this discussion, this mother-daughter discussion. We'll figure things out. I'll get closer. And then she announced to me that she said, I just have something I need to tell you. And I said, what? And she said, well, when I was in college, I was addicted to heroin. And
Mm.
I didn't know anyone whose kid was addicted to heroin back then. It was 2014. I didn't know what to think of this. And then I said, what happened? And she said, well, I had to get out of where I was. And I came home, and I remember around Christmas time, I was sick up in my bedroom for 3 days. And I told you I had the flu. I was going through withdrawal. And I thought, what? I had no idea. So she didn't understand addiction either. She thought because she wasn't doing heroin anymore and she was still doing alcohol and pot and whatever, that everything was fine and she was
Right.
all better.
Right.
And I knew better. I knew that wasn't the case. And so that's when I started going to Al-Anon and started educating myself about, oh, here's this new thing I need to understand. So
So you didn't know about addiction, but you knew was it because it was heroin that it really made you think, oh, this isn't something that's just going to get better on its own?
I didn't know anything about heroin. I just knew that she wasn't, even though she wasn't doing that, she still wasn't acting right.
Right. Right. You saw a
And
shift
so
in
I
her.
I just knew
Yeah.
something was off, and I had to educate myself about what that was all about.
Yeah. Your mommy
And
spidey sense was tingling. I totally get that. So you said you mentioned you went to Al-Anon. What
mhm.
else did you do?
Well, I mean, I got a sponsor. I went through the 12 steps. I also, I mean, I just decided that I knew enough to know that this was a family issue, and I didn't want her to think that she was the sick one in the family, that all of us had stuff we had to learn. And so I did all that. But I also was reading books on Buddhist thinking and that were connecting um, recovery with Buddhist philosophy. And I think there was a book called One Breath at a Time that I was reading at that point. And I'd also met Tommy Rosen, who is not Buddhist, but I mean, he was sort of going the next step beyond the 12 steps as far as he was concerned in terms of how to make recovery a lifestyle choice as opposed to just getting rid of substance problems.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started learning all of those kind of things. And I went to my therapist at one point and she said, you're just like Demeter. And I said, who's Demeter? And she said, the Greek myth about Demeter and Persephone. And I said, no, tell me about it. And she said, well, Demeter's daughter gets dragged to hell and her mother goes crazy and can't figure out what to do and is running around and I thought, oh, that's me. That's totally me. I get it. I totally identify with it. And then I said, so what happened after that? And she said, well, you'll have to read the myth. And I didn't read the myth for a while, but once I went back and started reading it, I realized that not only did I identify with this Greek goddess who was going through something similar, but also she had to go through this transition of having a child and transitioning to having a young adult and all the things that she had to go through to let go and to accept what was going on, accept her daughter as someone who was different. And so that's when I started getting the idea for the book to fashion the book in a way that both of my experience and the Demeter myth were in parallel, because I wanted to take the mother shame and blame narrative out of this century and look at it more in terms of like, how does any mother at any point in time go through this transition that is difficult and extreme in my situation because of the drug addiction, but it's really what everybody goes through in some ways. And so I wanted to take a look at that.
No, I thought that part was fascinating, and I want to talk a little bit more about it. But first, this is a question that I had when I dove into your story, which was you go to therapy with her and she says, I was addicted to heroin. Your
Hmm.
spidey sense tells you that there's still addiction about. But I didn't
Hmm.
quite get what the sense of urgency was for you to deal with something that maybe wasn't an issue anymore or an active issue. Why go to Al-Anon? Why go to therapy? And I feel like maybe you're trying not to tell your daughter's story. Is that correct? Like you're trying to be respectful of her boundaries?
Right now, you mean?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
um, a little bit maybe, but I think also, well, everything came to a head when she had stopped the heroin, and then she got arrested and went to jail for a night, and that led to how this can't go on. This Something's got to change, and so she went to um, a addiction counselor, and the counselor said you have to go to AA every day or NA, and by the way, to me, you should start going to Al-Anon while you're at it, and um, so I think that was the catalyst that
Mm-hmm.
brought everything to a head and said, okay, this is a problem. This is an issue that we both need to deal with. We all need to deal with, and that um, I can't just sweep this under the rug anymore. This has come to a crisis point
I see.
where if we don't address this, it's going to get worse.
Right.
And so
And so was did she at that point recognize that this was not just they weren't isolated incidents, that they were connected?
I think going to see that counselor was the first time she felt that somebody really understood her. I think before that she was able to dance around therapists and tell them what they wanted to know or didn't want to know.
Yeah.
But this woman had been there. She had been an alcoholic and was in recovery herself. She knew all the tricks,
Mm-hmm.
and she got it.
Yeah.
And she said, I really think you need to go to rehab. And so that's what happened. She did go to rehab.
When I think it was right before my book came out, uh Scott and I, there's like a neighborhood bistro where we eat sometimes. I've been eating there for years and years and years, maybe 30 years.
Hmm.
And the owner is very sweet and we're very friendly when I see him, but we've never socialized outside of the restaurant. And he contacted me because he saw the subject matter of my book
Hmm.
and told me that his daughter had been in and out of jail, was addicted to drugs, and that he was at his wit's end. And he was looking for my counsel as to
Hmm.
and she was in jail at the time that he wrote me, where he felt that she was safe. Like, at least she's in jail. Like, at least I know
Right.
where she is. And I felt that
Hmm.
pain. But I also, I have this from being on the other end. I have this sense, for me, no one could have said anything to me. No one could have done anything for me. There would have been no intervention that would have made me want it.
Hmm.
I would have been put in different circumstances and maybe gone through those circumstances, but I wouldn't have wanted it until I did want it, which
Right.
happened on my own. And that idea that we can produce that in somebody to make them want it, right, is a great obsession, especially for the people who love the addict or the person that's struggling with a substance or depression, or like, because I just know a lot of other parents whose children struggle with depression, and it feels like the same dynamic to me.
Hmm.
They are,
You
trying to produce a certain effect in their child to make them want to get the help, and it's really difficult. So this is what I loved about your story. And there wasn't much I could say to this man who was very sweet and dear, but there just wasn't much I could share except for my own experience.
Right.
But you found, or your therapist found, this myth and presented it to
Hmm.
you as a comparison, and it made sense to you, right? It,
Right.
it made sense that if my child were taken to hell, and addiction
Hmm.
is hell on earth, who wouldn't go in after them, right?
Right.
Trying to rescue them and bring them back. So, what did you do as a result of this work that you engaged in, and learning more about this myth and yourself? How did you help yourself and therefore heal the relationship, or heal your relationship with your daughter?
Well, I think it was a combination of the myth and also the Buddhist readings that I was doing, the Pema Chodron and all those type things. I it finally I finally got it that we're all on the spectrum of addiction or attachment, if you will. That we all want something different than maybe the way it is at this moment. And what I wanted was my kid to be better. And so for me to, I also felt that I was really racked with guilt and shame. And I couldn't let go of that because I felt if I was powerful enough to cause this problem, I was powerful enough to fix it.
Mm.
And I realized that once I realized that that was not doing her any favors, I, I, I understood that the path I was trying to go down, which was to force her to get better in some loving way, wasn't going to work. It just wasn't going to work. And so I had to focus on myself and healing myself alongside of having compassion and support for her, but recognizing that her recovery was her recovery and my recovery was my recovery. And I just had to stay in my lane and do my work and also not abandon her, but support her. So that just changed the whole dynamic between us and got us closer. So
Mm.
thanks to this myth, we were able to see each other as equals, as equal women who were both wanting recovery for ourselves as opposed to wanting it for the other person. And I think that that brought us much closer and also helped me get grounded in what was truly important. Um,
Which is,
so I don't know, which is, just accepting her for who she is and her path.
but I think it's hard. I mean, I hear what you're saying, to draw a boundary, to stay in your lane, to be compassionate. But the practice of that, it can't be. I mean, and I hear you say you had a light bulb moment, right? Like,
Hmm.
oh, this is very clear to me now. But
Right.
how do you put that into practice? Like, if we're talking about, because you mentioned the 12th step and carrying
Hmm.
this message to others who might suffer, right? The reason
Hmm.
for Craving Spring to be
Hmm.
written. What is the practice you tell other parents to engage in?
First of all, I don't tell other
Yes.
parents. Secondly, I studied mindfulness for many years, and so when those feelings come up of anxiety and um, wanting to just jump out of my skin, I take a breath, or three or five. I wait 24 hours. I journal. I mean, if I need to, I call a therapist. I mean, I try really hard to give space to that situation so that my reactivity is not in play, but that I'm coming from a different place and I can respond in a way that is helpful
Mm-hmm.
and of service, as opposed to me needing, instead of my need, which is I don't want to feel uncomfortable, so I want her to be better. I learn how to be comfortable with myself first
Can you give
so
me an
that I'm not
example?
putting that on. Pardon me?
Can you give me an example?
Well, I think the 24-hour thing is really important
But I mean, like a
because
time when that worked.
uh um when when she was when she came home from rehab and a friend of hers died and she had a relapse, I had to accept the fact that this was part of recovery and that it wasn't always necessarily going to be that way. And it wasn't that it was okay, but I trusted her to find her way out of that, and that I was there for her if she needed help. But I I couldn't have done that for her. I couldn't have got her back on track. She had to do that, and I realized that. And so for me, the issue for me was really to, how do I sit with those feelings? How do I not overreact or not have a knee jerk reaction or not insist that she does this or that, but appreciate and have compassion for what she's going through instead. So I think that that's a kind of thing that, of course, it was uncomfortable. I didn't want it to be happening, but I had to build trust. I had to trust her and her process. I had to trust me and my process. And I had to believe that even if things weren't going to work out exactly the way I wanted them to, that I wasn't going to be in control anyway.
Right.
So that was, not going to work.
Yeah.
It's hard. It's really,
It's
really
hard.
hard. As a mother, one of the most difficult things, I think, we go through it in little ways, and then we have some of these kind of situations where it's really difficult. But it's a practice everybody, I think, has to go through at some point, of letting go.
Yeah.
And what you're letting go is, you're not letting go of your child, you're letting go of your fear. And that's different. And that's what I had to learn.
Because the idea that you have control over what your child, even if they are an adult child, does or doesn't do, or happens to them or doesn't happen to them, is an illusion.
Right. Exactly.
So it's letting go of that illusion, which is scary, because there are scary things that could happen anywhere on that journey. And,
Right.
Sometimes it's the scariest thing that could happen,
Right.
the thing that we don't talk about, right? Because it's
Right.
unthinkable.
Too unthinkable.
But that too is a possibility, and to embrace the fear around that and not put it on somebody else.
But also to make sure that they don't feel alone, because I think loneliness and isolation is one of the worst things that can happen to anyone who's facing addiction or depression. And so just to stay in touch and to stay in contact, even if, just to let them know that you're there.
Right.
Also.
To stop monitoring their every movement, but also being a constant support for them,
Right.
in a helpful way.
Right.
And that's a balance you have to learn. I think that's not something.
It takes practice.
Yeah.
I don't do it correctly. I slip up. I have to go back and reset all the time.
Yeah.
All the time. But I do it now in a way that is more honest with myself and with her. And I'll be honest with her, and I say, "Oh, I did that again. I'm so sorry. Let me start over here."
Yeah.
And so, that's the compassion I have to give to myself as well.
So you've been on this journey for over 14 years, is that right? And how's your daughter now?
She's great.
She's great.
She's great. Yeah, she's great.
That's wonderful.
She finished college. She's got her certificate as a health and wellness coach. She wants to help other people get healthy. She's not just from addiction. She actually had some chronic illness that she had to deal with. So she's really looking to help other people gain a healthy lifestyle.
That's wonderful. That must make you so happy.
Oh, I couldn't be. In fact, I was, she wrote the epilogue for my book. I wouldn't have published it if she hadn't read it and hadn't accepted it and hadn't been on board with it. So I feel very proud of her and very excited for her moving forward.
So just before we end, you talked about the myth, but you didn't talk about Craving Spring.
Mm.
So could you explain the title and where that fits in the myth?
Um, yes. The way I see it is when Demeter's daughter was allowed to come back to Earth, she could only come back for a certain amount of time. In 3 months, she had to go back to the underworld every year. And so during that time, her mother was in mourning, and Demeter was the goddess of the harvest. So when she was in mourning, all the crops would fail and not fail, but die back, and it would be like winter. So that's where we get the idea of winter and spring, is every time Persephone, her daughter, comes back, it's springtime and the flowers are blooming and everything's wonderful. And then 3 months a year she has to go back, and Demeter's sad, and it's dark, and the trees are barren. And so I think as a mother, we're always craving spring. We always want things to be wonderful and perfect for our children. And the truth is that life doesn't work that way. And there are going to be times when it's winter and times when it's spring. And I think I got caught up in craving, wanting everything to be perfect for her and wonderful for her all the time.
Mhm.
And so that's where that title came from.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's beautiful,
And it also
Anne.
fit in with my own personal,
Yes.
addiction to wanting to fix her problem.
Right. Right. No, it's such a beautiful idea, and I was not familiar with that myth, so that just really was fascinating to me. And
Mm.
I'll be passing your book along to people when they come to me from this point and say,
Mm-hmm.
my kid, my kid, my kid, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? Because I think what you're doing with this title, Craving Spring, is you're letting them know that you stand with them. I get it.
Exactly.
I get it. We want
Exactly.
that spring, but here's my journey. And what I had to do to get to the point where I was okay regardless.
Right. Well, it's like you with writing Stash. It's like I want other people to not feel alone.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So
So, yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for this discussion. I was really looking forward to it. Um, and I just think it's such a beautiful story. Tell me, where can people find you,
thank you.
Anne?
The easiest place is on my website, which is annbatchelder.com.
Great.
Pretty simple.
That is
So
really simple. Can you spell Batchelder for those who might not be
sure, it's
familiar?
ANN, and the last name is BATCHELDER @.com.
Excellent. Excellent. Are
So
you on socials at all?
Facebook and Instagram. Yes.
The
So
necessaries.
and those links are on the website also.
Great, great. And your book
So
is as well? People can purchase your book through your website?
yes.
Fantastic.
No, the easiest place is through a bookstore or library or Amazon
Okay.
is where you can find my book.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Great.
Yeah.
Well, thank
So
you again. I hope the weather in Asheville is better than the weather
it's
here.
great.
Yeah, we're
No,
sending you some rain, so be ready.
Yeah, we
yeah.
are sending you rain as we speak. It is on its
Uh-huh.
way. So brace
Oh no.
yourself.
Yes, brace yourself.
Um,
Well, thank you so much, Laura. I really, really am thrilled to be here.
yeah, no,
Thank you.
we were happy to have you. So thank you.
Yeah, lovely conversation. Thank you.